Okay, this is assignment 4, subatomic still life. Step 2, darks and middles, warms and cools. By this time you should have already made your value study, and now it's time to start the painting process. As you can see by the nomenclature associated with step 2, we're going to be working on the dark and middle values and start investigating the cool and warm colors we can find. This is my picture. It's from Providence Canyon in South Georgia. It's pretty monochromatic, but still we're going to work with a very limited palette of ultramarine blue, Hansa yellow, quinacridone red, and titanium white. And you can see on my palette I've got a triangle of blue, yellow, red in the top and white in the lower right hand corner. So the first thing I start doing is mixing some neutral colors, and I do that by adding a little bit of yellow and a little bit of red to make an orange, and then I add a little bit of blue and mix what's on my brush as far as orange and blue together. Now the first thing that I do is I very abstractly squint and look at where the dark colors are. If you really look at the photograph on the left side of your screen, you'll see that right now I'm working on that large area that's kind of starting at the center left of the composition. I'm not covering completely. I'm just very loosely brushing in some abstract brush strokes that symbolize what I'm seeing, but aren't overly finicky. Now, as I start to mix more of the color, because you will start to run out, you'll notice that the color starts to lean slightly red, slightly green, slightly blue. So if you really stop the video right now and look at those different patches, you'll notice that the top value is kind of a dark gray. In the middle, you have some browns that have a reddish tinge to them. In the lower left, it has a kind of violet tinge. It doesn't matter whether you're working on a photograph that has a green object in it or a photograph that's a flower and has bright yellow colors. The shadows are going to tend to be neutral. That's just the way that shadows work. So it doesn't matter what your subject matter is. Yes, mine happens to be all brown, but don't be confused by that. Just because it's all brown doesn't mean that if you don't have an all brown image that you're going to use more intense colors. Those will come later when we get to the middle lights and lights, which is the stage that we'll work on during the next class. But for this stage, all you're doing is working dark. So I'm just adding more color of that triangle of the three primaries into the middle and just mixing more dark when I need it. When I run out, I put more paint in the middle. If it doesn't match, it's okay. Okay, the next stage is mixing up some middle tones. Not complicated. You're just taking the same three colors, ultramarine, quinacridone, and Hansa, and mixing white. You can see how it's about halfway between light and dark. The dark's on the palette, the white's in the lower right-hand corner. So I'm just mixing a dark brown. For those of you who are working with objects that have a brighter color, you're going to be mixing a more intense color. In other words, it won't be brown anymore. You'll just add more blue and yellow if you're making green, or add more red and yellow if you're making orange, or add more red progressively. It still won't be the most intense version of red or green or yellow or whatever color you're working with, but you will progressively add more of whatever middle tone you're seeing in your subject matter. Now you'll notice that I squeezed out some more paint. This is the first time in this process that I've squeezed out more paint. And you can see I leave a little bit of the original middle tone there, which is kind of greenish, and mix a slightly redder version. And really all I'm doing is painting in between the blacks. Because if it isn't black, then it's middle or light. So you might as well put middle everywhere. It's a lot easier than overthinking the lights or the transition from middle to light, which is what we're going to be doing on Monday. Sorry, on the next class. You'll notice I keep dipping my brush. That's not to clean it. That's to get one brush full of water to make my paint a little bit more fluid so it spreads more quickly and over a larger surface area. And I use just one brush full because that's a standardized measurement. I can't get any more water in the brush than one brush full. That way you don't have to think, oh, this is how much water I put in. So your brush becomes kind of a measuring tool. One brush tool, one brush full, two brush full, three brush full. Notice how I just keep mixing into the middle of the larger pile. That's so I can see if I'm getting the same value and the same hue. Of course, I'm not going to get it precisely, but that's okay, because just like with the darks, you're going to have some variation. So if you have green, it's going to vary a little bit green, a little bit blue. If you have violet, it's going to lean a little red, lean a little blue. If you have orange, it's going to lean a little red, lean a little yellow. If you have blue, it's going to lean a little blue violet. It's going to lean a little blue green, so forth and so on. So again, if you're working with a more intensely colored image, or you have an image that has multiple moderate intense colors, you're just going to be mixing versions of that are all green but have temperature change, warm and cool versions of green, warm and cool versions of yellow, warm and cool versions of red. It's almost more complicated when you're working in a brown palette like I am, but it's all brown. Don't think about it as different variations. Just think about it as the same color speaking louder or softer, leaning one way or the other, standing on one foot or the other. We'll get to more precision with the color in the last layers. Okay, now you're going to notice that I'm going to start mixing darks again. I've almost got the whole page, or canvas I should say, covered, looking for all the white spots. And now I'm going to mix some more darks, and that's because I'm starting to lose some of my initial darks. So I want to reinforce that arcing shape that goes from left to right. Then I'm going to go in this dark middle area here. I'm going to push those a little bit darker. And again, I'm not worried about mixing one color. So you're kind of re-establishing the darks at this point. And you might even come back with some middle tone and kind of have a little battle between the darks and the middle tones. And you can see that, those middle tone or dark tones are a little bit darker, a little bit easier to see now because of the contrast. And, they're varying in temperature just like before. Some blues, some reds, some violets. And you can see also that they're kind of blending in to the middle tones. The beauty of working the whole like this, which is always important, is that you really have like an entirely open surface. An open surface means that it's wet and you can blend directly. But again, I want you to just, squint and look at the shapes that I have, and you'll see that they're roughly in the right spots. So at this point you can see that I've almost got the entire painting done, and I'm working very quickly back and forth between dark and light. I can still see some little tiny glints of canvas covered, so I just start using my wet brush and blending the paint in. Just very little water, just kind of touching each one of those spots. And then my whole canvas is covered. So here you can see the result. Obviously mine's a little bit on the pink side, and the photograph is much yellower, but that's okay. When I overlay my lights into those really bright areas, and you can see them if you squint, I'm going to predominate with a yellow kind of khaki color. And that's going to, through simultaneous contrast, affect every single color that you see on that canvas right now. The main thing that you want to be concerned with is that you have the middles and the darks. Other than that, you don't need to worry.